Welcome back to the Becoming You podcast. I have a very, very special guest for you today. She is someone that I was introduced to, it feels like months ago, but it was really just about 45 days ago. And I have had the privilege of getting to work with her and really learn about her genius. And, I say genius often because we all have this innate genius, but I must say today's guest, Francesca Sipma, she has a genius that is pretty unparalleled in what I have seen in the space of healing, growth, and really becoming your best. So, Francesca is a certified breathwork coach and hypnotherapist. She's a former New Yorker who worked at top agencies and was chasing this insatiable lifestyle, which we were going to dig into today, before deciding to go on a spiritual self sabbatical. So, she studied personal development and healing modalities, and you'll hear us talk about all the things related to growth and personal optimization and really unlocking your purpose, which is her specialty. But through her journey, through research and experimentation and coaching, she is the creator of Hypno Breathwork, which is a breakthrough method to clear energetic patterns, reprogram subconscious belief, and take intuitive action to create the life you want. Welcome, Francesca.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to dive in today and see if our listeners can really tap into what is possible. And I think that's something in coaching we hear often, but you have actually built out tools that you're getting those results again and again in, I'd say, light years ahead of what anybody else out there is doing.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a lot of self-experimentation and then obviously refining the process, but I think we've cracked something pretty big.
So let's go back to the beginning. Your pre-New Yorker days or going to New York, like when I hear about you working in advertising, of course, like Sex in the City comes to mind, but take us through like what life looked like at that time.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so a day in the life of me in New York was basically wake up at 5 a.m., pop an Adderall, go to boxing class, then go to a hot yoga class, and then I would go into the agency and just grind for 10 to 12 hours, and then I'd party. I would go party after that, maybe take a Xanax or an Ambien, and then start all over again. I mean, the rate I was going at was really extreme. It was really intense. I can't even imagine how hard it was on my body,
Mhm.
but that was the pace and that was the lifestyle back then.
How did you do that for 10 years?
It was really intense. I mean, I think, being in my early 20s and just having what I thought was a really intense drive, but also now understanding it was also validation of my worth and I needed to keep achieving and keep accomplishing more to kind of keep those hits and highs coming. You just get used to it. You just get used to operating at that level. But I do remember I would go home, for Christmas break or something like that, and I would just sleep for 12 hours because my body was just catching up. Um, but you just get used to it. And then that becomes your conditioning and your baseline and your nervous system, and you keep going. Luckily, I caught it in time to start
Mhm.
to reprogram some of those behaviors.
What you just shared about going home and sleeping, it's like that. I resonate so much with that in my 20s, thinking pulling a weekly all-nighter was just like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
same thing, I'd go home and I would be just collapse.
Yeah.
And when I say home, the same thing, back to my parents where,
Yeah.
you're out of that you're back into the nest. So was there any point before you decided like to really change things up? Was there any point on that 10-year journey where you were saying like, there's got to be something more, like, is this it? Or, or even questioning your happiness?
To be honest, no. When I was in New
Wow.
York, I just kept going and I kept finding the next thing. And there's so much stimulation in that city. So whether it was the promotion or it was the account or it was the next agency, I just kept finding the next hit until I decided to move to San Francisco. So after agency life, I'd made it at the top agency, and Anomaly was the number one agency I ever wanted to work at. I was on Google, like that was it. Like I made it, and I was like, okay, still not satisfied. So what do I need now? And I went client side. I'm like, okay, now I'm working Bacardi global marketing team. I'm traveling business class around the world. We have this company condo in Bermuda. I mean, it was so glamorous, and I was still unfulfilled. But I kept thinking there's something else. So I said, maybe I need to move to San Francisco and do the tech startup thing. Maybe if I have more ownership, more autonomy, and I'm doing something more entrepreneurial, I'll be fulfilled. But that's when I realized that there's not something outside of you that can
Mm.
fulfill you. And San Francisco was the moment, it was like the pivotal moment for me where I had to hit rock bottom because I didn't have the parties. I didn't have my friends, and I didn't have all the guys, and I didn't have all the career achievement and fulfillment. I was just like, holy shit, it's just me and my thoughts now.
Is that a
And
scary
that
place?
it was a really scary place. So that was the moment for me when everything around me slowed down, that I was forced to be more introspective and really understand what was going on inside me and what void I had been chasing for all those years, which New York is a beautiful distraction, but eventually you have to face yourself. And the slowdown in SF was the moment where I was like, something's broken.
Mm. And what did you decide to do? And how long did it take you before you made a move?
You
Literally a
know,
move.
yeah, so I was living in, I thought it was Soma, which is like the tech startup scene, but it actually wasn't. Now I realize it was kind of on the outskirts. So I was living in a pretty rough looking neighborhood. Like the homeless situation in SF is not ideal by any means. And I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to go outside. Like there was literally people shooting up heroin injections outside of my apartment, and I did not feel comfortable. And I didn't want to do my 6 a.m. workouts and walk outside in the dark anymore. So I stayed home. And when I was home, this is brand new concept for me as a New Yorker. I was never home. I started reading. So prior to this, I'd really never picked up a book because I was always out. And a couple people had recommended The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I read this book, and I remember being in like the first chapter, and he talks about this concept of having a radical awakening where in one moment you just witness your thoughts, you're almost looking in outside of it. And I realized, holy shit, I'm not my thoughts. If I can witness this, then I'm not that. And I became pure awareness, as he says.
Mm.
And it was just this magical moment where I learned to be present, where I was like, oh, I'm constantly chasing something in the future, or I'm harboring some resentment of the past. And I'm never just here in this moment. How can I find gratitude here in this moment? And I was like, I'm safe, I'm healthy, I'm in a beautiful space, I'm laying in my bed that's so comfortable, I'm reading this amazing book, the weather's beautiful. It's like, holy shit, I was finding gratitude in this present moment. So that was the opening. That was the opening of me to become curious and find some kind of peace and solace within myself.
That just gave me full body chills.
That
I
book
mean,
is brilliant.
it
Yeah.
it is, and just I mean the way you even just you recited that passage, it's like, oh, we all need to have that check-in, that back check-in, which I
Yeah.
know that is something you've built, is the ability to create that space. So you
Yeah.
read this book, or started to read, and you started to get still
Mhm.
with your thoughts, and you started to be more connected to the moment. And
Yeah.
at what time did you decide, like, it is time to go on my, a pilgrimage of sort?
Yeah. So at the end of that book, he has recommendations for your next read. And I'm like, I need to get every single thing that he says to read. And the second book was called Living in the Light by Shakti Gawan. And it's so simple, this book. It's such a beautiful read. And I remember being like, I'm not going to work today because I just want to lay in bed and read this book. It feels so good. And that's the whole thing she teaches. She's like, tune into your body. What feels good for you? This is how you live in alignment. And this is how you start to follow your intuition. So her whole concept was how to balance these masculine and feminine energies. And feminine is really leading with that intuitive energy and that inner knowing and that gut feeling. And then masculine is actually taking action and executing upon it.
Mm.
Because most of us have the gut feeling, and then we get into our logical mind and we just dismiss it. So I thought, I'm pretty desperate at this point. I'm going to try out this concept. And there's an exercise or a meditation in the book where she's like, just feel into what it is that you want and what feels good for you. And I remember just going down a list, like, is it this? Is it this? Is it this job? Is it this apartment? Is it? And I got to Bali and I was like, whoa, my whole body started buzzing. It's buzzing right now. Chills. I was
Mm.
like, it's Bali. It's Bali. I just need to go to Bali. And I don't have the answers and I don't know what I'm going to do in Bali, but it's lighting my body up in a really magical way. So that's the cue that I just need to trust. And that's exactly what I did. I booked a one-way ticket and that was it.
You're like, job quit, apartment gone, goodbye. Oh, that, I mean, you're giving me chills again here because I don't know if I shared with you that twice in my life I booked tickets to Bali.
No, you didn't tell
Now,
me this.
in college, my roommate at the time, she'd been there before, and we booked tickets and ended up not going because a boy situation. And then this last year, during the beginning of the pandemic, I actually had tickets. I was going for a retreat in May of 2020 that
Oh
obviously
my
got
God.
canceled. So you're just reigniting my own, like
Yeah.
listening to it. But I love this idea of tuning in, and really what you said about the masculine and feminine, because I think you and I have that in common, that, you're further along in that journey because you've really learned to master it, but of operating in that masculine and that do. And I love that you talk about the duality, because if you're in the masculine without leaning into that feminine and that
Mm,
intuition and that feeling, then you're in do, but it's not necessarily aligned do,
mm,
right? Or aligned action. But if you're all in the feminine without ever taking action, you're just like kind of sitting and spinning, but
yeah.
not actually
Yeah.
creating.
Yeah. And the cool thing about kind of mastering that balance is it actually requires a lot of self-trust. And I think that this is a missing concept that's not really spoken about, because if you can trust your intuition and then follow up on it, not needing to know the final outcome, that's where a lot of us will start to pull away, because we want the security of the plan. We're goal oriented. We want to know the next steps. We want to have it mapped out. But trusting your feminine is trusting in the uncertainty and the unknown a little bit, and being able to just surrender. But when you have that trust in yourself, knowing I'm going to get through this. Like, I trust the journey, whatever is meant to happen, whatever obstacle comes, like, I'll be able to move through it. That's a really peaceful place to be in. And what actually ended up happening when I booked that one-way ticket is I remember going to my boss and saying, I quit. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And she was like, no, that's not happening. And I was like, what's happening? I remember calling my girlfriends and being like, I think I just wasn't allowed to quit. Like, something really weird just happened. But she was going on vacation, so I just assumed she wanted to wait until afterwards. And when she came back, they actually laid a bunch of us off at the startup, and I ended up getting a severance, which
Oh,
paid for my entire thing. So the universe works in these really magical, mysterious ways. And if you trust and surrender a little bit, I mean, it'll open doors for you. You're not doing this alone. The universe literally like conspires to help you along the journey when you're in alignment and when you're following your intuition. And I have 100 stories like that of things that helped keep me afloat during that year spiritual sabbatical, trusting.
the life is happening for you, not to you.
Yeah, exactly.
So you go to Bali,
Mm.
and what happens then? Like, what begins this? I say it's your version, your unique version of like eat, pray, love, but you did a lot, probably less eating, a lot more, a lot more of the praying and the loving, right?
Yeah. So I have this trip to Bali, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do there. I started looking up retreats. I'm like, I should do some cliche meditation yoga retreat while I'm there and just have a self-care time. Well, this website just jumps out at me, by Sacred Breath Academy. And there was a private 7-day retreat, and it was for breath work. And I just assumed breath work was some type of form of meditation. And her words spoke to me. Her words are very much like Eckhart Tolle. And I was like, this feels good. So I'm going with the feeling. And I just booked it. I signed up for it. And I walk into the 7-day retreat, and I'm a little bit skeptical. I'm a little bit apprehensive. I'm consider myself to be extremely self-aware. I'm like, I've been in therapy. I understand my behavior patterns. These are my daddy issues. I was just very much by the book. And they were like, cool, we're going to do this thing called holotropic breath work, where you take
Mm.
these deep, intense breaths for 60 minutes. These sessions were, and we're just going to allow any emotions to come up. And I remember one of the teachers said, you might crawl or howl or scream. And I was like, what the hell is he talking about? That'll never happen to me. And within several minutes of doing this breath work, I was shaking and my hands were vibrating and my lips were pursing, and I have full body chills as I'm telling this story. And at the end of that session, I just see this image of myself as a 7-year-old girl. And this text appears on all black that says, "You're too hard on yourself." And I start bawling, and I just cracked open. Like, that retreat just cracked me open to a level that I had no awareness of, like no conscious awareness of. I just felt all this emotion being released from my body. And it was so transformative, so powerful, that I was hooked on the first session.
Oh my goodness. We talked about holotropic breath work, and we'll talk about why what you do now. Like, I feel like it takes the best of that.
Mhm.
Um, I had done a session as well, and I just remember, like, I tell people it's the most intense experience I've ever had outside of giving natural birth at home, without medication. Um,
Wow.
and and same thing. I did it in a room of people, and it was very interesting to see the different responses. And you're kind of like in your body, but you're aware, but not
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. It's like this half in, half out
Yeah.
place, right?
Yes.
Because you're accessing these altered states of consciousness, but you're still in your present form. So it's very trippy. And after the first session, I remember popping out and taking my blindfold off. And I just looked at the two teachers and I said, what the fuck was that? Like, we told you it was going to be really intense. And I was like, okay, let's go round two. So the next day, I remember the next day going into the session that I was really excited because it just felt like there's this crystal ball inside you and you're going to get these answers and what's going to come up and you don't know. And the next day, I remember I saw myself in this red maxi dress in a grass field next to a gong. And I was like, I've not seen this feminine version of myself. I was like,
Wow.
that is not the party girl New Yorker, like on a Sunday fun day. So I was like, that is unique. So that connected me back to your essence is actually very sensual. It's very playful. It's very feminine. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm missing so much grace being in this tough girl New York act all the time. And every day it was just breakthrough, breakthrough, breakthrough. On the last day, I even birthed an entire company of how I was going to bring this thing to life. So once the unblocking and the healing happened, the creative energy started flowing, which is when I knew, okay, this is a really cool process.
So then how did you manifest that you in a red field? Because I feel like then you were called to your next location.
I was. It's so funny you say that because the teachers were like, okay, that sounds exactly like pyramids of chi. And pyramids of chi is the sound healing. Have you been in Bali? Oh,
I know I haven't been to Bali at all.
oh, you didn't go after the first in
No.
college. Oh, I thought you went after the
No, so
college.
third time's
Okay.
the charm and you are
Oh,
calling me to
right.
go to Bali. It
Oh,
is the
yeah.
time.
I have the perfect itinerary for you. We might end up on the same trip. So
I'm there for it.
okay, good. So Pyramids of Chi is this really incredible like sound healing wellness center, but they have developed this thing called acoustic bioresonance, where it's basically water beds on speakers with sound healing, like didgeridoos, gongs, the whole thing. And it is very similar, like they say, to a psychedelic experience. And she said, well, it sounds exactly like that place. I was like, okay, well, I'm booking my session, to go there. And when I did that experience, my intention was to release the sense of urgency because I was still hardwired as a New Yorker. I'm in Bali, this beautiful, serene, like very relaxed luxe place, and I'm hustling. I'm like, what are you doing?
But
Like,
you can't
why?
stop it because, like you
You
said, it's
can't.
hardwired. You're
Yeah.
aware, but you've
Yeah.
integrated the awareness.
I'm looking at my driver's like, are we almost there? And I'm like, what rush am I in? I have nowhere to be today. So I went and I set that intention and I literally felt little particles lifting from my body. And it was like this sense of urgency from my cells just coming up and dissipating. Again, I have chills when I talk about that. And it's been gone. It's gone. It never came back.
All right, I'm going there.
Yeah.
I haven't released that yet, and I require that.
Yeah. So that part was gone, which allowed me to ease into the feminine a little bit more and not be so addicted to that hustle.
So you've released the urgency, you've tapped into the
Mm,
feminine, you've
mm,
unblocked, you've healed, and now creativity is just flowing through you.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
where did this, I mean, you had already built this business out in that first session, right? Or in
Yeah.
that week. So what happened next? I'm like this, I want to know the story. I want to watch the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah. Well, you know a little bit of the story through your own experience because on the fourth session, it was actually on my mom. And I said to the teachers, I don't have any issues with my mom. I have a bunch of daddy issues. I don't need to go into a session with mom. And they're like, I think we should explore it. And that was the most brutal session I've ever been through because I felt my mom. I felt her sacrifices for me. I felt her love for me. I just saw her whole life from her eyes, from her lens. And it was so emotional. I was in fetal position, bawling hysterically, shaking. And I wrote my mom a letter that evening saying everything that came up in breathwork. I saw your escape from Vietnam. I saw you having, being pregnant with me. I saw you coming into my dorm rooms in college. Like I just saw everything and how I lacked appreciation, how I lacked gratitude. And I'm so sorry. And that moment of having the opportunity to say the things I needed to say to my mom, that was the moment where I was like, this isn't just an incredibly powerful, life-changing modality. This is my purpose. Like, this is something I have to give to the world. Because if you have the opportunity to heal and find that compassion and rectify those relationships, I have to help people do that.
Yes.
So that's when it became a mission and I had to study it. I had to get really good and like master this craft. And I went to every workshop. I was on Eventbrite looking at places in East Bay. I went to India. I went to Peru. I went and I tried every breathwork workshop, every teacher I could find, as well as every other modality. So I could compare and make sure breathwork was the one.
You built a tool belt or toolkit.
Yeah.
But the lightsaber, since we just were at Disneyland, is still breath work. But you created
Yeah.
your own type of breath work. So talk to me about, when did that happen? When did you realize, in all this research and this mastery that you could combine different things to create this like
Mhm.
supercharged tool?
Yeah. So I think what happened was I had made about 50 people try breathwork after my retreat. I said, I was sending them links to places in their location. I was like, you have to do this. You have to try this. It'll change everything. And they weren't having as profound of experiences as I was. And then I was getting frustrated and confused. I didn't understand like what was happening. And I realized that I have an innate ability to connect the dots and to really process my intention to my outcome. So if I was going to allow people to have this really big experience, I had to figure out how to help integration at scale. So that's when I started pulling in other modalities. And I found, I love Lacey Phillips to be magnetic and some of the journal prompts that she asked, and also the holistic psychologist, they were very thought provoking for me. So I said, okay, what if I ask some of these questions before people go into a session so that can help, pinpoint like a focal point for them as they're breathing. And then I had a really wild hypnotherapy session with this woman named Kartika in Bali that still stays with me to this day because she moved me through these emotions and objects and memories in my body. And I said, oh, could I combine that with the breath work? That would be fire. So I tried it on myself and it was accelerating the process. It was accelerating the pace. And I was just moving through blocks, one after the other, one after the other. I remember being in Chiang Mai for a month, and every single day I would experiment on this. And I was just releasing, when I was 14 years old, this happened. When I was 7, this ex-boyfriend, all these things that I didn't know were stored and trapped in my body. I just started cultivating this practice, creating it on my own, and moving through my blockages and realizing I can facilitate this for people and it's going to have the same impact. And it
Mm.
did.
Let's talk about your physical body for a moment. How do you notice changes, whether it was just the way you felt, illness, immune system?
Mm,
I'm always so fascinated because I consider myself a biohacker of sorts.
mm,
But, we talk about, and you actually recommended the book, The Body Keeps Score,
mm.
to me.
I love that
How
one.
did you see that in your own body of like releasing these emotional blocks and the transference to the physical?
Well, I lost about 5 to 10 pounds after coming out of my retreat. So that's a week. That was a week being in there. And I was so lean and thin when I came out of it, which they had me go on a vegetarian diet when I was on there just for digestion and making sure that things could move fluidly. So that could have something to do with it. But for me, it felt like I had just rid pounds of emotional baggage. And what I've seen now in a lot of my students and my clients is we reference the book, You Can Heal Your Life, Louise Hay, a lot. And we tie back to where you're feeling the physical sensations to what's going on with you emotionally. And I've had people in sessions say, I had this intense knee pain, and it just popped and dissipated and it's gone. And that's crazy
Mm.
because I'm like, okay, well, the knees represent pride and ego. And then in our session, we went through where you're not being connected to your higher self and you're still in your ego. And when they're able to shift and see that, the actual physicality of it releases. So I'm a huge believer in chronic pain is tied to emotional well-being. And when you can get to the root of that, it'll start to change and shift your physical form. I have so much more energy. And I know where to move it and where to block it and what's going up now. So breath work, I've heard countless stories of how breath work has helped shift what's going on with people physically.
So you created hypnobreath work and you're now
Mhm.
seeing, people getting results. And now I love the fact that, you are not just like a master of what you're doing, but you do it daily. And like talking to me about how you utilize this every day, your 25 minutes a day, that is like the most powerful tool, and how you utilize it for making decisions as well.
Okay. So if you do breath work consistently, you will be able to drop into deep theta states, which is when your brainwaves are more suggestible. You'll be able to access your subconscious mind, which is the storehouse of all the information you've ever seen, infinite intelligence, and you will be able to make new creative connections and you will have extreme clarity. So when I read all these pieces and started experimenting with this and realizing that, hey, this can actually drive my business forward. I can breathe and find the words I want to write, the message I want to say, the people I want to partner with, what my content is going to look like, how I want to flesh out my business plan. I was like, this is spectacular. And it's saving me hours during the day. The first time I realized it was when I put my first website together and I just did a breathwork session on what do I want the page to look like? What do I want it to convey? And I came out and in 3 hours it was built. Amazing, right?
I mean, literally, we talk like I talk because I love talking about productivity about, an hour planning is worth 10 hours of doing, or it can save you 10 hours. But I think the 25 minutes, it could save you like, 25 days of fumbling forward.
Well, people say it to me all the time, like, I don't understand how you've been able to scale your business because I've only been doing this for a year and a half, 2 years. And I'm like, breathwork every day. Breathwork every day, act on the insights, and it's that simple. Breathwork gives you just this intense clarity, but it's also divinely guided because you're connecting to your higher consciousness. So when my breathwork practice would say to me, last year, hey, COVID, people are, stuck at home and they're having a lot of fear of uncertainty. You need to start offering virtual classes. I was like, okay, cool. And it was out that day. I just posted it and people started coming in. And then my breathwork would remember everything that was in the chat box. And it would say, there was a lot of people talking about relationships and being stuck at home with their partner. That's the theme for the next class. And I was like, cool. And then I started seeing people wanting to pursue purpose. And then in my breathwork, it was like, it's time to create a course. It was just so perfectly guided and organized. And I love organization. And
I'm right there with you. I'm like, but this idea of like organization and flow and creativity, like this is nirvana.
It is. And I say that too. I always say flow state for me is when productivity meets alignment. And when you can tap into breath, get out of your conditioned way of doing things, access different regions of your brain, allow those connections to be made, and then you have the courage to take action on it. It is a game changer. Game changer.
So before we talk about action, because I know that action is something that you and I are both big fans of, I want to talk about intuition. And you really shared with me about this idea that people think that they've lost their intuition and how that's just not true.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. I used to have a really strong intuition, but I just can't hear it anymore. And I'm like, you hear it, you're just ignoring it. So we get this ping, but then our logical mind takes over because there's just been too many events. There's been too many things that have happened that have showed us that we can't trust ourselves. We need external validation. We can't trust what's in here and this inner knowing. That's not the credible thing. The brain, like this thought is what we need to lean into. And that's so programmed for responsibility and security and stability that when we do the breath work, we're actually clearing out those little blocks and the things people have told us so that we can hear ourselves again. Like it's the body reaction, right? It's like, do you want to do this thing? Yes or no? And your body's like, no, but your mind's like, you have to take the opportunity, FOMO. And then everybody chooses that. And I'm like, it's not an alignment for you and it won't feel good. Do the thing that feels good.
And what's the relation between fear and intuition?
So again, fear is when you're getting more into your head. What could go wrong? How will I be perceived? What's the judgment that's going to come? And intuition is just this like safe, sacred knowing that this is your truth and your truth is okay. But to me, in order to really build your intuition, you also have to build your courage muscle. So every time you hear the ping, if you act on it, if you flex that muscle, it'll start to get louder. It'll start to get clearer.
And then it's not so hard because you start to recognize I'm getting this ping. This is not me being called forward. It's not a block to stop.
Not just that, but you'll be rewarded for it. And I know that sounds a little bit woo-woo, but I realized this when I was not following the fear, but following the intuition when I started researching breathwork, because my mind was like, you need to go back to your marketing job because you need to monetize. What are you doing? And my body was like, no, but just book the ticket to India and it'll figure itself out. And then I'd be at the airport and they'd say, flights, oversold. Who wants this $1,000 voucher to go on the next one? And I'd be like, oh,
right.
And that was happening over and over and over again. So I kept getting rewarded for following my intuition instead of my fear, instead of my mind. And that's when it just solidified for me. I was like, okay, I don't need to know what's going to happen. I just need to trust myself and move forward.
And moving forward. So that's the action component. And I know that's a huge part of what you're teaching, whether it's through breath work or to your students, is to take that action right after a session. So talk to me about action and why it's not just about executing something.
Oh, okay. I'm obsessed with action. I think you and I both were super
We
action
are.
oriented people. Yes. And that's the difference between having a profound breathwork experience and actually changing your life. So, unless you take the insight that you saw that came through, that was the message, the download, the insight, and you bring it forward in your day to day life, you make the call, you say the apology, you send out the thing, you launch the product. That's how we actually create the life that we want. So, breathwork is giving you the insight, it's giving you the vision, it's giving you the next clue on the path. And then it's up to us to take that and move it forward into the real world, into this dimension. So that is when I track patterns of how my clients and my students are doing, the ones that are off creating their own reality are the ones who had the courage to take bold action. But what I have noticed is, like you said, action isn't just about execution. And for some people, that is the subconscious block that has kept them from the life that they want because it feels like a threat. It feels like a threat in their nervous system. So it takes some massaging and expanding and experiential visualizing to be able to step into that. So I have empathy and compassion for those who, feel that block when it comes to the action, but it's the crucial imperative piece to actually change your life.
Is that fear about taking the action, or is that fear about what reality looks like after the action?
Oh, I mean, the subconscious blocks behind that it's a laundry list. It's the fear of criticism. It's the fear of uncertainty. It's the plaguing self-doubt. It's because mom told you weren't going to amount to anything. It's because dad never said he was proud of you. I mean, there's so many things. That's why there needs to be some healing involved first so that you feel comfortable enough to take that first leap, to take that first step.
Let's talk about hustle. I should say, let's talk about our 20s, hustle, hustle, hustle. And then for you in your 30s, for me, I feel like it was late 30s and now 40s that, is really about tapping into that flow, because I think you hear those buzzwords all the time.
Yeah.
And I think people, especially, in entrepreneurship or people just very driven in the corporate world, they know when they feel like they're grinding because you feel exhausted, right? And when you're hustling, and when you feel in flow because you feel excited, you feel creative. But you have created these principles of how to actually tap into flow intentionally and to stay there. How do we do it? Tell us.
Okay, let me tell you. So again, your subconscious mind is filled with all the information you've ever seen in your life. So anything you've read, anything you've been inspired by, anything you've learned, anything you've trained. So all the information's there. When we use breath work, we are over oxygenating our body, and it actually quiets down the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical mind, all the ways that we know how to do things, habitual behaviors. We're stimulating the different regions, which is the subconscious and all that other information that's just playing around in there. And it allows us to make new creative connections. So, oh, maybe it's that concept with that person, and it's that color, and it's this partnership or this investment. So we actually allow ourselves to become more creative when we use the breath to shut down that part of our brain and access the grander scale of our brain. So in flow state breathwork, what we do is we set this intention of the project that you're working on right now, or what you want your strategy to be, or you need to know your messaging, or what the name of the book is, or what the concepts are. And so we have that intention so we can focus your brain. We go into breath and we cue with the right music. It's very upbeat, trancy music. It's very different than other sessions. And we start to bring forward solutions for that intention. It is thrilling. It is exhilarating. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this every morning to scale my business. Can I do this at mass? Like, can I teach this to a community? And I remember my first session, I was really nervous. I was like, I don't know if it's going to work for everybody. And at the end, I said into the chat box, if you got clarity, type a C into the chat box. And the chat box just lit up, C, 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 C. And I was like, whoa, okay, cool. What insights came up? Got the business name, know my logo, I saw the partnership, da, 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 da. And I was like, wow, chills again. So this is a process where you bring the content to the surface. And I still say, read all the books. If you have that skill, you want to know it, you want to master it, read it, understand it, and then have corresponding skills so that you can make it unique to you when you go into breath and it connects in new ways. So bring the content up to the surface, breathe, let the connections be made, and then you take action. Flow state breathwork.
Oh, so good. Okay. Adding it to my calendar every day. I mean, I've done a few. It's like, oh,
yeah,
so good. So you here you are mid-pandemic. You've like created this new spiritual technology, really is what it is. And you decide to launch a course or to create a course. which is not just, how to do hypno breath work, but is really around like these different, I mean, you call them modules versus modalities of like, understanding the blocks or the relationships or these different
Mhm.
typical, I'd say, traumas or blocks people have.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how it's so important or why it's so important to do each of those pieces to get to that ideal life on the other side.
Yeah. So our good friend Jason Liu is the one that planted that seed for me. He goes, I think you'd be really great in teaching a group course. And I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's for me.
Then you did breath work around it.
Yeah. And then I did breath work the next morning. And at 6:30 a.m., I sent him a message that said, thank you for planting the seed. Here are the 12 topics of my course. He
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
this looks great. So what ended up happening was I saw my whole journey. And how do I condense that into 12 weeks? And I saw that the first month has to be on clearing the past. You have to release the emotional and energetic blockages of the past. We have to reprogram the limiting beliefs that have been instilled in us by our caretakers unintentionally. And that's how I focus the first month is we got to explore your relationship to your mom, to your dad, to your siblings. What did your inner child need? And then when you're unblocked and your channels are more clear, we can go into flow. So second month is we're connecting your creative skills. We are looking at your past occupations. We're looking at the obstacles that you've overcome, your passions, what you're curious about. And that starts to connect to give you really clear direction on the thing that lights you up and how you're supposed to be meant to be of service in this lifetime. And then, what ended up happening for me was then I was ready to explore relationships and partnership and go through, that new layer of healing. And I added that to the last end of the course so people could break relationship patterns so that they could understand how to do sex transmutation, take those creative energies for higher clarity so that they could find more polarity in their relationships. And it's just this really beautiful, comprehensive 12 weeks where we cover every topic. It's like 12 milestone topics in your life that you can go back to and keep clearing the layers. But when you come out of that, you are unblocked and you're clear on what your life's purpose is.
And what happened? Tell me about some of the stories.
It was magic. I mean, I couldn't have asked. I didn't even know to dream of what came out of the course, even after the first session. I remember first class, first session, one of the guys comes out and he just realized that he had a sexual trauma that he hadn't thought about or processed in decades. And that was the block. And it was so moving. And we're all like in tears, it was just so powerful. And then I've had several people quit the job. They quit the corporate job, they quit the safety net, and they just went all out on doing the thing that lit them up and starting their coaching business and having immediate clients because their energy was so strong and magnetic and radiant. And then in the last class in my Unblock Your Purpose 2, one of the guys confessed feelings for one of the women in the course because he saw her come up in breath work. He was so moved by her courage and her bravery. And then he wanted to step into his courage. So he shared it in front of the group. I mean, the girls were messes. It was so beautiful. And it was so cool because his intention going in was, I want to live my purpose, but I want to also just be wholehearted, vulnerable, and courageous. And then that was the display in the last class. And I mean, he did it. He stepped into the version of himself that he wanted to be, and we all got to witness it, and it was incredibly special. So between breaking behavior patterns, and I'm not a people pleaser anymore, and I'm not attracting toxic relationships anymore, to actually living and doing the thing that lights them up and being of service, I mean, the possibilities are endless.
Wow. And you had students that went through this, and then many of them were called, because I think when for those of us that are called to do the work on ourselves, it's because we're called to, create, like you said, greater purpose, right? The path to purpose, or unblocking your purpose. And once we are able to do more of that healing ourselves, we want to impact people on a bigger level. So you already had naturally were calling people that had that desire to in some way serve or coach or heal other people. And several of your students came out of it and said, like, I am called to also facilitate breath work.
Yeah. So there was 1 week, it was about midway through Unblock Your Purpose 2. And I think I got 6 DMs or emails from various people who said, I just want to let you know that you've inspired me and I want to become a breathwork coach. And do you have any resources you recommend? And the first one I was like, okay, cool, that's awesome. And the second one I was like, oh, that's interesting. And the third one I was like, what's going on? And the fourth and fifth, I was like, okay,
I'm going to breathe on this.
I need a breath work on this. And I did. And of course, it came through that I need to create a masterclass. I need to create a masterclass to help people understand the format of it being the most effective type of session and really help them cultivate their power and their specialty. And the masterclass was, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe it. One of the most insanely rewarding experiences of my life thus far. Just 2 days of incredible energy and collaboration, and just, it was thrilling. And so many ideas came out of it. And what I realized was I've really created a process. I've created a process by combining breath work and hypnotherapy, visioning, a lot of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And I want to package that and give it to people to go into their unique specialties. And that's the coolest thing, because when you take your story and you put that spin on it, now there's a breathwork coach helping ex-athletes transition into their purpose. And now there's a coach who said that, she had bipolar and therapy and the prescription pills didn't work, but breathwork did. And now that's her audience. And then there's a coach that is helping, people in the service industry transition into it because that's how she used it. So now there's all these practitioners that have these unique specialties that are bringing this incredible tool into the world and hitting people at mass. And it's become really special.
It's a big ripple.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So this path, I mean, so here you are, and you've created something that you use to heal yourself, right? I mean, that you researched and mastered and refined until it became exactly what you wanted, and then you helped people with it. But now, I mean, you're in this position where you're really stepping back from being a coach, right?
Yeah.
To becoming an entrepreneur that's taking this tool that you have manifested, breathed, created forward. How have you juggled? Maybe it's not juggled. How have you accomplished that, or gotten to action on that to create a bigger impact? Because there's a lot of releasing ego there of like, I need to be the person to touch the people, to help them, to teaching your methodology and allowing other people to then be in service with it.
Yeah, well, it's just living my own principle of taking intuitive action, right? So people asked me a year ago, like, will you do a certification? Will you mentor me? And I was like, no, absolutely not. And that was from a place a little bit more of ego, because I was like, this is so sacred to me that people come and trust and allow me to go into their subconscious and help them release, decades of trauma or blocks. And I don't trust that other people will be as responsible with it. Like, will you have research? Will you have read? Do you do your own deep work? And so I was very much keeping it close to the vest and protecting the process. And as more people came into the Unblock Your Purpose course, if you come into that course, I know you're legit. I know that you do deep work on yourself. I know that you're healing your own traumas and behaviors and being the best version of yourself. So there's a trust I already had with those people that came in. And then when they became curious about it, my intuition was like, foster their growth.
Mm.
And it was that simple for me. If it comes through in breath, if that's what I'm being called to do, like, I see myself as a vessel, and this was the message that was coming through. And I'm here to help people really have what I consider to be the sharpest tool in the kit, but also merge it with if they're life coaches, if they're meditators, they're yogis, like all these different things, they get to make it their own special, unique way, but with a really effective formula. So I just listened to my intuition, and the people that felt like they had a very pure intention, I wanted to give this to them. And that's what we're starting to do now with a certification that's coming out in July.
So exciting. How do people that are listening to this, and especially that are coaches, that are healers, that are people that want to help others, and maybe they're already helping, but they want a tool that can supercharge the results and the impact that they're getting. How do they become part of this?
Well, they can apply. There's a few days left to apply. The course is happening, the certification is happening on July 22nd to the 25th. So they can go on my website. It's francescasipma.com, and they can just fill out the application. And if it's a good fit, we'll get on a call and I'll learn a little bit more about their coaching business to see if this is the right, fit for them to move forward and carry this out into the world. I think the coaches that I really want to take this on are the ones that have again, a really pure intention, but also understand that we can't just be intellectually aware of something. We have to experientially release it as well.
Mm.
So all of our clients who have been in therapy, and even us, we're like, we know, we get it, we're aware, we're up here. But until you release the energetic patterns from your nervous system and expand and start to fire those new neural networks and neurons to step into this new way of being, like, it has to be experiential. So if you're ready to take your coaching practice to the next level, then I highly recommend they come apply.
Last question. So here you are, and you have so much has happened in the last year and a half. And I think a lot of people, well, normally, and Tony Robbins says this, right? People are celebrated in public for what they've done for years in private. And you are actually the opposite of that, because it's something that, yes, you lived the struggle, right? You lived the awareness without the integration, but then this has all been really created in the last 2 years because you have figured out this, and I don't want to use the word shortcut because that cheapens it, but you have figured out this tool to be able to tap into all those things that we often put, the therapy and all of these other modalities into to get these results. And now you're working on bringing this out on a bigger platform. Talk to me a little bit about like straddling that divide between the spiritual technology and being a spiritual being.
That's a really great question. And I mean, the thing that's not seen is the months of being like in fetal position or in Vipassana, crying out all the blocks in that year, right? And that was really difficult too, because you're like, this isn't productive. I need to start monetizing or making the thing. But that healing was incredibly productive. And that's why I am where I am right now and today, because I did a lot of unblocking healing to create from a very clear channel. So for me, spirituality is business. Business is spirituality. And when you know how to merge the two and you know how to find that sweet spot, which is intuition and action, then it's a different kind of energy that hits, that penetrates, and you're creating more meaningful impact. We can create impact all day through force and effort and by doing, but to create the type of meaning that actually contributes to the greater good, where we're being of service, we're helping people get into alignment, and we're actually spreading consciousness, that's a really beautiful mix. And when you can find that sweet spot, and I really believe that breath is the catalyst for it, because it gets you out of the head, it gets you out of the ego, and it gets you in just a much more soulful, intentional place, the opportunities are just endless.
Intuition plus action creates meaningful impact. That is something I will be writing on the window on my computer, because that's a simple formula that requires deep work, deep hypnobirthing.
Yes, exactly.
And where can people find you to get a taste of this? If they're like, I need to experience this thing that I'm now hearing about called hypnobirthing, where can they find you? And of course, I'll put your website in the show notes also.
Yeah, so I actually have a couple of products online now where you can do it at your convenience. So there's a flow state breathwork on my website, which is the thing that I do every single morning to get into flow. And that's just a 30-minute session that you can do at home on your own in the mornings. And then there's also a manifestation breathwork that's a bit more deep, powerful. I know that you've done that experience.
Love it.
Yeah, it's a really good one. That's also on my website. And then I'm always announcing, new retreats or workshops and stuff that I'm doing. So they can find me on Instagram at Francesca Sipma, or go to my website, francescasipma.com.
Listen to her. This is the sign that you need to do it. And I will just share that in the flow state breathwork that you did a few weeks ago, I was really like in this turmoil around some business thoughts and like, what do I prioritize first? And I had done, the brain dump with my coach and all of the things. And what came through for me, it was like, write the second book, because I realized not realized, the breathwork showed me that writing that book would require me to do the work, because when I write, I have to master it in order to write it. It was like,
oh my God.
I know. And so I was just rewriting it down. I'm like, okay, make sure that book is, schedule that time and to work on it, because that, like yourself, it's like, if you're going to be an expert in something, there is that mastery that is involved. And I'm just so grateful for you, Francesca. And again, for everyone listening, go to her website, download whichever calls to you. Do you have a specific order that you recommend that people go through the different sessions?
Manifestation first.
Manifestation first.
To unblock and then go into flow. Yep.
And then flow. All right. Manifestation. And everyone out there, you are all working to manifest your dreams, your impact. Here is a tool to do it with much more ease, much more flow and supercharge everything that you're already doing into what you're meant to create.